All right, just waiting for it to show up here, confirm that it's live, and then we'll get started. I'm not seeing it live yet on my phone. If anybody in the chat can let us know if you're seeing the stream, please let us know. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see
there we
it.
go. Now I'm seeing it.
Live.
Okay. All right, great. If anybody in the chat can let us know if you're seeing the stream. Okay. All right.
We are live.
We are live. Mike Turber is driving around in his tiny car on Las Vegas Boulevard, and he will be joining us shortly. But we want to go ahead and get started, and he'll kind of jump in here. I was going to start with some lengthy intros, but I don't think I'm going to do that, Laura. I am going to go over a little bit. I'll plug your website here, and I'll do the same for Mike, and then we'll just kind of get started. There's Mike. Mike, you're muted. Just heads up. You might already know that. Okay, so Laura, I'm just going to plug your website. I believe it's lauraloomer.us. I think most everybody that's going to be joining the stream live will probably know who you are. But if you don't, or you want to find out more about Laura, please check out her website, lauraloomer.us. And your Twitter is @lauraloomer, if I'm correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. And she also has a YouTube channel here. Let me pull this up here. So there's her website. She also has a YouTube channel. You can search for Laura Loomer. I'm subscribed to her, so you can look at my subscriptions, or you can just find her by searching. And then as for Mike, Mike has a YouTube channel, 5x5 News on YouTube. And I'll put these links in the description of this video once we're done as well, so you can grab them, click on them. And that is it. Mike, are you with us?
I am with you.
Awesome, great. Okay, so I think how we should get started is I'd like to kind of dig into your guys' history as far as how you've been involved with the Vegas shooting investigation for anybody that doesn't know, and then kind of how you guys met. And I believe you guys met over the phone. Is that correct? Mike, you just called Laura?
Correct. Yeah, what it was there was some stuff going back and forth. Laura was over at, I believe, Jesus's house, and we were trying to run a tag on a car that was in front of the house. It was a Corvette, and somehow we got the tag number, and I ended up calling the owner, and that's kind of, I was trying to give her correct information. We were going back and forth, but that was the first time we met, and it was to introduce her also to Stephanie, which is the one of the first people interviewed.
Great, and then you guys have worked on multiple things in the meantime, right, Laura? You guys have, I believe you guys both went up the service elevators either one time or multiple times?
Yeah, so there's a community, of course, of people who have been following Las Vegas shooting updates and, of course, Las Vegas information. And one night I had been talking with Mike, and I said, wow, wouldn't it be really interesting if someone did an undercover video inside the Mandalay Bay service elevator to show that they're lying about improving their service elevator and their security? And he said, well, it's funny, I was thinking about the same thing. And so we went up one night and we filmed it, and he had been doing other videos as well, and did it several other times after we did it together. And so then that ultimately caused Fox 5 in Vegas to cover the story. And then because MGM is a sponsor of Fox 5 Vegas, they actually fired the news director who allowed for our video to go on air 1 week later. And they didn't show it on the 11 o'clock newscast, only the 10 p.m. hour. And so they fired her, and they told all their employees they were not allowed to communicate with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's been like a common theme, right, in this investigation, that it seems to me like anybody that tries to dig into it from one of the news agencies, somebody that's not independent, they seem to get silenced pretty quickly. Would you say that's fair?
No, it's fair.
Yeah.
And, the video was bombshell because it forced MGM to also release a statement. They had said, oh, we've seen Loomer's video and we're going to take it into account in improving our security going forward. But from what I'm told, they still haven't improved their security, and it's still wide open. So MGM, of course, they're just scared because now they're being sued, and as a result, they've countersued the victims of the Las Vegas shooting. They're suing over 1,000 of them because they don't want to have to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in legal fees to settle with these victims, right? Because essentially, according to their statement and the official narrative, which has been given by LVMPD, Sheriff Lombardo, Aaron Rouse with FBI Vegas, and MGM officials and CEOs, is that one of the Mandalay Bay employees assisted Stephen Paddock, who they're claiming it was a lone shooter, even though we all know Stephen Paddock is not the Las Vegas shooter, right? They assisted him in bringing up these weapons, these bags full of weapons. And you have employees who said, well, that's not standard procedure. And even Steve Wynn himself in an interview in the days after saying that people are not allowed to use the service elevator. So right there, just given that one fact, we know that MGM is liable for what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's at least some level that and they're trying to bury that, right?
Right.
They're trying to prevent, I mean, they have done almost nothing that seems like, to me, like they care about the victims. I was there on the anniversary walking around when all of the various casinos were supposed to turn off lights, right? And kind of,
they didn't.
and kind of sink in. Yeah, all of the MGM hotels stayed lit. Now some of the other, hotel brands participated, but they really didn't do much.
My hotel, when I went back to Vegas this time around, had a direct view out the window of Mandalay Bay. And I had just finished going to that ridiculous memorial service they had, in which they had that garden where they planted the trees. And then it was essentially a campaign rally for all the Democrat politicians who wanted to come and slip in their comments about how we need to get rid of guns. So it wasn't a very nice memorial. I didn't enjoy it very much. I thought it was very politicized. And the people don't care about trees. They want answers, not trees. So it's kind of ridiculous, in my opinion, for these officials to, make it sound like a memorial full of trees is really going to make a difference for the victims and their families, because I think that they would much rather have answers and not be sued by MGM and have a motive, right? Because I find it very hard to believe that if this was just a lone shooter, they still don't have a motive, right? The FBI has still not released their final investigation, which they said would be released by October 1st, 2018, and they failed to do that. So I was looking out my window and the lights were not off. And I stood there for the entire time, 11 minutes, and I watched it, and they did not turn their lights off. And one of the employees who works at Mandalay Bay actually sent me a message and said, wow, it was so obnoxious tonight because there was a lady who visited, and she was at the festival, and her husband was killed, and she was staying there, right? And she was there for the ceremony at the time when they were supposed to dim the lights. And she said it was so obnoxious because they were blasting rap music and the lights weren't turned out. So clearly MGM and Mandalay Bay, they don't really care about the victims even 1 year later. They just care about making money. But we all knew that. That's not exactly a surprise, right?
Right.
You can go back to the Vegas Strong clothing brand, which was created, and there's no documentation of any of that money being given to the victims, right? Millions of dollars. Somebody profited off of the Vegas Strong merchandise line, which they are still selling in MGM stores. And now it's Vegas Stronger, right? So they can make more money.
Yeah, they rebranded, so everybody has to buy new shirts and
and then on top of that, they had the GoFundMe, which was supposed to raise $15 million for the victims of the Vegas shooting. It raised a bit like $12 million, from my understanding. The one that Steve Sisolak and Sheriff Lombardo launched, and they still haven't given the money to the victims, despite the fact that they said it would be done over like almost a year ago, right? That is, a year ago is when this happened. They said that it would be done. It would be distributed immediately. And then they said it would take 3 months. And then we were told it would happen in March after they released the FIT report in January. So where's the money, right? Where's the $12 million?
Like strategically, from a political side of things, do you think it might be being held strategically so that Sisolak can release at a certain time that might benefit his, election chances?
I don't know. I wouldn't even be surprised if they pocketed the money. We're talking about mafiosa style individuals. And, anybody who lives in Nevada or Vegas knows the way politics works there. It's very dirty. I don't understand why they wouldn't give the money up immediately. It looks very suspicious, right? You have all these victims, and now MGM is suing them, and you have $12 million sitting in an account somewhere. Why not just give it to them like you said you would? Right. I think that anybody who is living in Nevada, especially 2 weeks out from election time, Steve Sisolak is now trying to politicize the Vegas shooting tragedy, and he's trying to use that as part of his campaign platform to be elected as the Democrat governor of Nevada. Nobody should vote for this guy. One, he's a slimeball. He's the Clark County commissioner, and he's been actively working with Sheriff Lombardo to block the release of Vegas shooting evidence. Secondly, he's had his own Me Too scandal, not to bring that up, but one of his 16-year-old daughters accused him of sexual misdeeds. And then on top of that, he wants to turn Nevada into a sanctuary state, and he wants to ban guns. And his gun policy is based completely off the Vegas shooting. And if there is evidence, as I've released, which shows that this was an ISIS terrorist attack, you have members of Congress who have been briefed on reports that show that ISIS terrorists came in through the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. Congressman Scott Perry, a Republican from Pennsylvania, was on Tucker Carlson's show explaining this. Well, then why are they trying to blame this on guns? Clearly, our gun laws do not apply to ISIS terrorists or violent criminals coming in through the Mexican border if they have their own guns. So what is banning guns going to do, right?
Yeah.
Guns for the terrorists and the criminals, but no guns for us. And it's very alarming.
The criminals are not going to follow the law anyway. So why any laws that they enact is only going to hurt a law-abiding citizen. So why even do it? Just work the laws that are already on the books and go from there. Putting another law on which takes more guns away from law-abiding citizens is not going to work. It's not the answer.
Yeah, another one of the citizen investigators, Sleep Depp, and I were both at the garden ceremony that you were referring to, Laura. And I think we were both surprised at how politicized it was being with what's her name, Gabrielle Giffords.
Why was Gabby Giffords there? I mean, I'm sorry, she got shot in the head in my hometown of Tucson, Arizona. But what does getting shot in the head give you any authority to talk about the Vegas shooting, right? It's just, they use her as a tool. They use this woman as a tool to push for gun control, and she can't even think for herself. She cannot form a sentence on her own. She has to have speech therapy. Her aides and her husband have to write out sentences for her and speeches so that she can recite it, but they're parading her around like a human tool so that people feel bad for her and then vote for liberal anti-Second Amendment policies to take away your guns. Yeah, it's really disgusting.
Yeah, we were both kind of looking at each other there and going, really? Because it just didn't feel like it was about the victims at that point, which was what the whole garden was supposed to be about. I want to step back a little bit and talk a little bit more about the lights going out. Mike, you were actually in the Mandalay Bay in the foundation room at the time the lights were supposed to go out, and that's where the music that I think Laura was referring to was playing. You want to talk a little bit about that experience there and kind of what happened?
Yeah, the director of another documentary that's coming out, me and her name's Amy. We were up in the foundation room, and I was filming, streaming live and everything. We were waiting for the lights to go out. 10:01 comes around, 10:05 comes around, the music doesn't go down, no lights went out that we could tell anywhere. And so we thought that would be our cue as to when we'd have that moment of silence and so forth. And since it never happened, there was never anything to do. So MGM left the music playing in the foundation room. It seemed incredibly disrespectful. We thought for sure MGM or the Mandalay Bay would dim their lights or do something. And then there was supposed to be the 58 lights from whatever spotlights they were going to put out there. We didn't see any of that. And the human chain that was going around the venue that I filmed from that height looked like it was going on. But as you zoomed in, you could tell there's chaos down there. There was no real organization, and it was really sad because a lot of the events sounded good before it happened, and then as the things came out and as it rolled out, there was not a lot of organization to it at all. And it just kind of fell apart. And then I got escorted out by 13 cops. So they came up to me at the end there while I was streaming and tapped me on the shoulder, asked me if I was Mike Turber. The next thing you know, I turn around, there's a wall of cops, and Mandalay Bay security, and I'm escorted out of the building. But the cool thing is when I got down to the bottom of the elevator opened up into the lobby area. There were all the protesters who had made it in. That thanks to Stephanie for organizing that and getting that done. They came in and sure enough, you could hear them just chanting, and it was awesome. So I walked right by them, filmed them, and of course the head of Mandalay Bay security, tells me to stop filming, and I pointed, the camera back at myself, and I said, "You can't stop me from filming. I'm going to film this." So out the door I went, being real nice. They were kind of nice about it. There was wasn't roughhousing me or anything. So and then started shooting again right across the street. So it was a rather eventful evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that video that Mike is referring to is available on his YouTube channel if you want to check it out.
And on top of that, what no one else is talking about is the fact that right after the memorial service at the tree or the garden, that ceremony that they have, the remembrance garden, there was a really loud explosion noise. And there were reports that there was an explosion at the scene of the memorial. Well, then LVMPD and the fire department arrived and they said, "Oh, well, nothing to worry. It was just a trash can fire." But for people who heard the noise, it was definitely a lot louder than a trash can fire. It sounded like someone set off a hand grenade because it was very loud and a lot of people heard it. And it makes you wonder if somebody was trying to blow something up or do some type of, I don't know, try to signal for the anniversary of the Vegas shooting. And just the fact that they covered it up so fast and said it was a trash can fire, and people went over there and said that it definitely didn't look like a trash can fire. I don't know, it just makes you wonder. We know that the LVMPD is very dishonest. We know it's not a conspiracy theory to say that the LVMPD lies, that Sheriff Lombardo lies. We have all caught them red-handed lying about the Las Vegas shooting timeline, right? The fact that there were 3 women registered to the room. They said that there weren't women registered to the room, right? They said that there was only 1 person in the room. We know that's not true, right?
Yeah, there's
they've constantly lied.
Yeah, according to the lock interrogation reports that were included with the final fit report, it does seem like there was maybe some activity that seems impossible to have been done by 1 person. For example, there were 2 attempts to open the door to 32135 from the outside. So and they both failed. So 1-2 attempt, and then in the next minute the door was opened from the inside. How is that possible unless somebody was trying to get in from the outside of the room? And then somebody inside opened it up and either let them in or had a discussion with them. It's very odd that happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on with that.
There's a lot of things. There's so many things that just don't add up. I mean, one of the things that I think is most concerning too, that is a dead giveaway that there were multiple shooters, is the fact that they said that there were 2 sets of gloves that were found in the room. And the second pair of gloves weren't documented in the evidence log in the fit report by LVMPD. Well, why would you not document the 2 sets of gloves? And why was one of the gloves on Stephen Paddock and then the other set of gloves on the other bed where the other window was shot out? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you intentionally not log evidence, right? That you cannot, as a police officer, not log evidence.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, with Laura had broke the original story on the leaked images, and being how they were tied to Levi Hancock, and it took a year before we finally got the answer on that. And we knew that the first images were obviously taken by Levi because he sent the image to TACOM to proof of death or proof of the person who was laying in front of them with the ID. And then. Now we have a tie between, Levi Hancock, and all of a sudden this reporter that was originally from Las Vegas is now in Boston, and somehow she gets these images exclusive. Jackie Heinrich. So she gets these images, and so I pursue it. Laura pursues it, and we're both going at it. And I contact Levi. I've got him on phone. I contact him by text messages, things like this. And of course, he avoids the question, wants to send me back to LVMPD. But then it took a year to get an answer. Sheriff Lombardo stated early on when that occurred that he would get to the bottom of it and that we would have answers, right? So then a year later, I confront him on a radio show when, I somehow got the call in, and they even told him the correct question I was going to ask. And I asked him about that and about what the investigation showed. And he denied Levi Hancock. He said, absolutely, Levi Hancock had nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. They had a relationship before. She gets the images. How does that happen? No way. No one's going to fall for it.
How does a reporter in Boston get the images first? Well, that's how, because we found out, and of course, this was information that was released many months ago. But yeah, I mean, it turns out that they were having some type of romantic relationship prior to this, and that's how this all happened. And I just think it's very unethical for LVMPD to not disclose that, because, first of all, he didn't have his body camera on, right? So then, his body camera is off, but he has time to send pictures to some girl he was dating of a dead body, right? I mean, it just reeks of a cover-up. You mean to tell me that you're trained to have your body cameras on to go into these SWAT-like situations to record information, and then you're not going to turn your body cam on, but your first thought is going to be, I won't turn my body camera on, but let me send these pictures to this chick I used to have booty calls with.
Yeah.
Just doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it's certainly fishy. Mike, do you have any additional information you'd like to share about Levi Hancock or that situation, or anything you've looked into that?
Well, in contacting him, the text messages that went back and forth, and whenever I directly confronted him with the information, of course, he's telling the first thing out of his mouth, "How did you get my number?" Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Well, I'm an investigator. I can get your number, bro." But it was just an odd situation. And then think about this: it took a year for us to get basically the final report from LVMPD. We haven't received the final report from FBI yet. But in that same year, we're promised an investigation into what would normally be a simple matter: who leaked the images. And then Sheriff Lombardo absolutely lies to me directly on that radio show that you were hosting. And he basically states that, they did the investigation. And I'm like, well, weren't you supposed to tell us? Someone has to confront you on a radio show before you actually tell us about the investigation.
Well, we already know that Sheriff Lombardo's a filthy liar. He told the American people that Stephen Paddock checked into Mandalay Bay on the 28th, when we know from logs that have since been released over the past 4 or 5 months, not immediately after the shooting, but now from court-ordered evidence from LVMPD that shows that the night of the shooting, over the log calls, they were saying that there were 3 females that were registered to the room, and they identified Paddock as being registered to the room along with Mary Lou Danley. And then on top of that, they said that he had a check-in date. This is in the transcription, word for word, in the document. Check-in date September 25th, checkout date October 2nd. So they knew the night of the shooting he checked in the 25th, but they lied and said he checked in on the 28th. And it wasn't until I showed up to the press conference on October 9th and confronted him, with the receipts in my hand. And I said, so when are you guys going to change the timeline? Because you do know that he checked in on the 25th. So why are you lying? And he said, ma'am, stop asking a question. And then he banned me. But obviously something very nefarious took place between September 25th and September 28th that they don't want us knowing about, or that they're trying to cover up. Something regarding the Las Vegas shooting, something very key to this terrorist attack that happened, took place between those 3 days that they do not want getting out to the public. And so that is why, that's why it's so important, because from the get-go, they've been lying to us. They knew the dates that he checked in. And I'm never gonna let that go, because it is such a key piece of evidence that this is a major cover-up. The fact that they knew.
Yeah. On top of that, when you think about it in the reality of the situation, and them trying to state, okay, Stephen Paddock's a lone wolf, blah, 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 he's the only shooter, da, 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 da. Well, if he is, then why such secrecy afterwards? If he's it, there's no reason to withhold all this information, especially for this long. Let go. I mean, you're not looking for other suspects.
Yeah, here's the thing. If everything points to a single shooter, right, then why even delay any release of any of the evidence?
Right.
Like, why does it have to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb? Why fight in a court battle the release of the evidence? Well, we know it was possibly somewhat political, but also, if it all points to a single shooter, why would there be any reason to hold anything back? And
there's only one reason. Only one reason.
The FBI was involved.
Because it will show negligence on the part of Mandalay Bay. And because it shows negligence on the part of Mandalay Bay, they're like, okay, hold on, let's go over this with a fine-tooth comb and only give out what makes us look okay when it's absolutely necessary.
That's not the only reason. It's negligence, and also if the FBI was involved. Like we said, this ISIS claimed responsibility, and ISIS has never claimed responsibility for something that they're not responsible for. Well, we know from background checks on Stephen Paddock and a lot of his property, and this new report from Mary Lou Danley's background check, which shows that FBI was listed as her place of employment, that Paddock and Danley have ties to the government, right? They have ties to the FBI. They have ties to government agencies. His plane was even registered to a government agency. So that would be a reason for them to cover this up.
Right.
If you look at similar scenarios involving guns and where Nevada was involved specifically the FBI, I can think of Fast and Furious, where a U.S. border agent was killed by guns that were being run by our government and an operative to identify cartel leaders who were distributing drugs and weapons. Well, it went terribly wrong, and it wasn't until years later an investigation occurred that we found out that the government was involved with that, right? The government was intentionally giving arms to Mexican drug cartel leaders in order to find and identify bigger cells and bigger weapon stashes. And I think that that's maybe what happened here. And I think that ISIS was involved. I don't think that they're lying about that. They would not take responsibility for this 4 times and then also have warned Vegas prior. And I think that Paddock may have been involved in some type of government gun running operation, which is why the guns were displayed in the room in some type of dealer-like fashion, the way that they were stocked and laid out on display, right? It doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. And you know what? For those of you who think, oh my God, that's such a wild conspiracy theory. Why would the FBI ever be involved with an ISIS terrorist attack or cover up their involvement in such a thing? Well, I'll tell you. Do you remember do you remember the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, where Omar Mateen, an ISIS terrorist, went inside this gay club and killed 49 people? You remember that?
Absolutely.
I was there.
And he claimed responsibility and said it on the phone to the police officer that he was doing it for ISIS. Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then what happened is his father ends up showing up at a Hillary Clinton rally a couple months later, right? And the liberals try to cover it up and make it sound like it's no big deal. And he just must be a Hillary supporter, front row. Well, I was covering the trial. I was covering this terrorism trial in Orlando several months ago. And when it was on trial 2 years after the fact, something that came up was the fact that Omar Mateen's father had been serving as an FBI informant during the time of the terror attack. So here this ISIS terrorist is, and his father, who has ties to the Taliban, is literally an informant for the FBI, and they did not disclose that information in the aftermath of the terror attack. The American people and the world were first informed about that 2 years after the fact when this went to trial. And because the FBI withheld that crucial key piece of evidence, the wife was let go, even though she was guilty. And the jury foreman all said, yeah, we knew that she was guilty in aiding and abetting ISIS and her husband in planning a terror attack, but we had to let her go because the FBI withheld evidence. So what makes you think 2 years from now, we're not going to find out in court when all of this goes to trial, right, during the lawsuits, that Stephen Paddock was an FBI informant and that this went terribly wrong while trying to identify an ISIS terror cell? It's not a conspiracy theory.
Right. So you don't think that...
even Martin went with him. He was on the FBI list of a watch list. He was supposed to be... Anything he did was supposed to be monitored. And
exactly.
Somebody dropped the ball. And he got away with whatever he needed to get away with because it was just absolutely amazing. That all of these indicators that were in place with Martin being... followed, or Martin having a history and a full file with the FBI, and he was not. He should have been monitored, active monitored, and didn't happen. Absolutely didn't happen.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder now. I mean, we can only speculate, right? What might come out of the FBI report, but it makes me wonder what might come out of that, and will we see? I mean, is it possible? Let's just speculate and say that the FBI report turns out to be something like 1,000 pages. It should be longer than the FIT report, given how many people they've stated that they've interviewed in multiple countries. Would it be possible for the FBI to completely bury something that major in such a fashion that once we dig through the FBI report that we won't be able to spot anything?
Yeah,
or do you
that's
think
what
that
they
there's any
did.
chance that's what they did with the Pulse nightclub shooting, huh?
Yeah, that's exactly what they did with the Pulse
Buried it.
nightclub, and it wasn't even supposed to come out. They were trying to bury this thing all the way through the trial, and it came out in the last week of the trial. I mean, this came out, and then there was closing arguments. I was there. I mean, I was kicked out. They even had me arrested at the trial. But it was out of control. And of course, the FBI is going to work to cover things like this up. Look what they did in
Even so, they'll
Garland.
bury it so deep in a report that all is convoluted. They'll word things a different way, and they'll say, "Oh, it was there or this or whatever," and everything's so convoluted at some certain point in time, no one really knows what to make of it. The report. I'm going to be very surprised if this report that's coming out, that supposedly was supposed to come out last week, which didn't come out, which hopefully will come out before the end of the year, which probably won't. It'll be after the first year. That the behavioral analysis unit, that their report is mixed in with it. And they're probably going to bury that. The motive is going to be some off the wall thing or no motive at all. And who knows what we're going to get. There's been so much internal turmoil with the BAU that there's infighting going on about, this motive, that motive, whatever. And they're mixing it together. And there's a lot of infight. There's about 25 people involved in that, the BAU. So it's going to be interesting.
What I find to be really interesting is how from the get-go, right, Sheriff Lombardo ended his investigation with the LVMPD a few months ago, right? He went on TV, gave a 20-minute press conference, and he was like, all right, that's it. It's all done. Well, did you notice how someone asked him, is this terrorism, right? And Sheriff Lombardo from the get-go has said this was not terrorism along with the FBI. But then he said, in my personal opinion, I think that this was an act of terrorism. And he only said that because days before, MGM announced that they were trying to get off of being liable for the Las Vegas shooting in these lawsuits with the victims by claiming protection from a 2002 law that was passed after 9/11, which basically allows companies to protect themselves in the act of a terrorist attack. So MGM, in their own federal lawsuit against the victims, is claiming that this was a terrorist attack. So somebody is going to be committing perjury. And I wrote an article about this because if the FBI is responsible for determining whether something is terrorism, that means you have a motive. That means that there is a motive if this was an act of terrorism, because the motive by default, the motive by default for something classified as terrorism is either religious or politically motivated. And so why is it now that MGM gave Sheriff Lombardo all this money for his reelection campaign? He won his reelection campaign. And now that MGM is saying that it's terrorism, Sheriff Lombardo is changing his tune and saying, well, I think it was terrorism.
Yeah, it is interesting that both MGM and Lombardo came out and basically, in one way or another, said it was terrorism. It makes me wonder, obviously MGM would be privy to more evidence than we have, right? Because they would have all the security footage,
but
maybe even additional evidence. And
they've been lying.
Yeah,
this was terrorism. We all know this was terrorism. It's an ISIS terrorist attack. ISIS
and then Aaron Rouse, he comes out, and Aaron Rouse in his interview on radio station, what have you, he comes out and point blank at 11 minutes and 30 some odd seconds into the interview says, this is not terrorism.
How would you know? How would you know?
Yeah. Well, the thing with him is if he's the voice of the FBI for this area, and he's saying something's not an act of terrorism, you got Lombardo saying it is an act of terrorism based on Nevada law, and you got the FBI, who's supposedly federal law, saying it's not. How are they going to handle this? How are they going to handle that battle? In
court, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and how long and drawn out is that going to? Is that going to be taking place? When will we get answers?
It's perjury.
Yeah.
It's perjury. That's what it is. It is perjury, and someone needs to go to jail, because if they're going to go to court and say that it is terrorism after saying that it wasn't terrorism, and the FBI is going to have to testify to that to give a motive, that means that there is a motive. The definition of terrorism means that you have a motive. So you cannot say that there is no motive and then also allow MGM to use the terrorism defense in court.
And they're wanting that strictly because they're shopping for a judge. They're shopping for, they're going to, the MGM will fare much better if they move this to a federal court. That's what they're doing. They're shopping for a judge to put that in a federal court because they know they'll fare better in federal court. They know they're not going to do so well here. So it's really a catch-22. You know, which direction do you want this to go? Do you want it to be an act of terrorism? Well, in the eyes of most victims, I don't think so, because that creates a problem for them as far as the limit of the liability because of the Safety Act of 2002. So that becomes an issue. So you want to keep that local, you want to keep it here, and say that it's not an act of terrorism as far as that's concerned. And then on the other end of the spectrum, then you have all these different definitions. You have 26 different agencies, all whose definition of what a terrorist act is involves some form of ideological component, some form of political component, religious component, something like that. And this doesn't apparently have that. We know Paddock was not religious at all. As to whether or not he had contact with ISIS, that remains to be seen. But if he did, and ISIS claim is true,
how do
then we
you
have
know
another
that?
issue.
How do you know that? You're saying that, but ISIS claimed that Paddock converted to Islam 6 months prior to the attack. And if he was an FBI informant trying to locate an ISIS terror cell, right, that he would have taken the Shahada and he would have really embraced the Islamic lifestyle to show that he was in fact a Muslim. So they may be saying that he wasn't religious, but honestly, who do we believe at this point in time? The FBI, which has a proven track record of being liars, or ISIS, which is very calculated, meticulous, and has never lied about an attack that they are responsible for? I'm sorry, but I'm leaning more towards ISIS, believe it or not.
Yeah, if ISIS was responsible for it, though, would they have? Because typically in their attacks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times they'll get some kind of validation or verification from the person. They'll state publicly, or they'll send them a photo and say, do you think it would be very risky for the LVMPD and the FBI to come out and say it wasn't terrorism? This is one of the things that's kind of stopped me from that theory, but even though I think it's still possible. But
that's a good point. That's a good point, but let me ask you this. Yeah. They said that the room was wired with a camera. Remember when they said in the days after that Stephen Paddock had wired the room with a camera to monitor the hallways to see if anybody was coming in?
Yes.
So there was an interview with a police chief on TV who was talking about how the camera used was a baby camera monitor. Why would you use a baby camera monitor as opposed to a regular surveillance camera? Well, I have the answer for you, because a baby camera monitor has a Wi-Fi receptor which allows you to transmit video or images or sound to any location in the world as long as you have an internet connection. So they never told us who was on the receiving end of the baby monitor transmission of the video. So there might be a video inside the room. There might be a video. Who was in the other room next door? Was it a watch room where people wired in the room next door where the doors were locked and basically drilled shut, but the window was open? How do you commit a shooting in two rooms when a door that's adjoining is bolted shut? How do you do that? Right? Was somebody in the other room monitoring with a wire, with a baby camera monitor? Who was on the receiving end of the baby camera monitor transmission? That's what I want to know.
We know who it was, and we know it wasn't Brian Hodge.
It's interesting, and it kind of takes us to another thing I think that that Mike, that you wanted to talk about, which was kind of the moments leading up to Paddock's death, and some things that you've uncovered in relation to that. Do you want to speak about that real quickly?
It took a year to do this, and finally, after getting the needle in the haystack was the suicide shot for Paddock. When did he die? The question is, when they breached the room, we had one officer saying that he tried to tackle them and he got off a shot and all these different things. And then you have another officer, and then you have Sheriff Lombardo himself saying they breached the room and they engaged the suspect. Okay, engaged in military or police terms, or any terms for that matter, means you actively engaged a living person. You're not going to engage a corpse. I mean, come on.
Right.
So you engaged a living person. So, okay, was he alive? Was he not alive? Blah, blah, blah. And if he was dead, like they say when they came into the room, which, where's the body cam footage of the first person that went by? Well, like Laura alluded to earlier, the body cam footage of the first person, Levi Hancock,
was off.
The guy whose name keeps coming up for some reason, is mysteriously not on. His camera's not on. Okay, guess great.
Oh, and then also, not to interrupt you, but you're forgetting the part where there's the audio that was released from, I believe it was the 10th or the 11th batch of of body cam footage that shows direct orders coming from LVMPD to tell officers to turn their body cameras off.
Yep.
Why would you tell officers to turn their body cameras off? Sorry to interrupt you, but it's a very important part.
Yeah, the only time I've ever seen that done, I've been in classes with the cops as they're being instructed. I've taught police officers hand-to-hand combat and all this other stuff, but I've never been in law enforcement. But the only time I've ever seen a time where that would ever be used is if they're talking about specific tactical instructions, blah, 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 of something that they're about to do, which even then they can work something else out about that. But that's the only time I've ever seen that command used to turn off, like a blanket command for all these officers to turn it off. Back to Paddock, the time frame at the end, assuming that he did shoot himself, then the final shot was you needed the time of death for him because it's all over the map. And then finally, after, of course, everybody's seen the bus stop video with the black guy and the white girl sitting there at the bus stop, which is about 150 feet away from me. They're there, and I ought to walk over to it. But you have those two shots, which we thought those might be the suicide shots. Well, why would you have two shots as a suicide shot? Who shoots himself twice? But come to find out, those two shots were the 308 shots. He shot two final rounds into the tanks, and here's how that came about. On page 34 of the FIT report, they state that 8 casings were found in room 134. 8 casings, but 6 of the shots were accounted for on the Uber video, which shows shot 1 miss, shot 2 miss, 3 miss, 4 miss, and 5 hit, and shot 6 hit. So those are the 2 shots that you see hitting the tanks. So where did the 7th and 8th shot go? Well, come to find out, the 7th and the 8th shot happens to be the 308 shots that were shot from an LMK, which is in the FIT report shows only 2 shots were fired from it. And they couldn't put 2 and 2 together, apparently, which is odd. But those are the 2 shots you hear in the video from the bus stop. And so after that, I knew, okay, that's the final 2 shots that we hear. We don't hear any shots past that. That's why we assumed that was a suicide shot. But all I knew was at some point in time, we have to have some sort of audio evidence from someone who was closer to Paddock's room at the time that he shot the final shot, his suicide shot. And we finally got that. That was when the video came out of the body cam footage of the officers going up the stairwell, the same video footage that shows the officer freezing. And they finally go up the stairwell, and a very faint needle in the haystack shot finally captured it. It took a while to isolate that shot. And then if that is in fact the suicide shot, we got it. And it took a while to get it. The LVMPD couldn't get it. FBI couldn't get it. So some guy from wherever comes out of the blue and gets this information and the evidence for them, like the CCTV video evidence for Melissa Ramirez, and these things that they should do. And they don't have it. A year later, and we're just like me and Laura doing all the work for them. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is how is it even happening that we're discovering things that they didn't even put in their final report? It's frustrating at the least. But one of the things I've heard people talk about is how the investigation was handed off to the FIT team instead of the homicide detectives, which at LVMPD are supposed to be top notch, yet they put the kind of the B team on one of the most important investigations maybe in recent American history. Why why put this smaller
McKay Hill's wife?
Yep.
You got McKay Hill's wife. I mean, you think about the conflict of interest that you have there of someone running basically the FIT team, and you have McKay Hill's wife, who's McKay Hill's the undersheriff. So you have that conflict going on, and then you're right. You should have a homicide team doing a homicide investigation. The FIT team, it was brought in big controversy, but keep in mind, a lot of the weight of the investigation was taken off of them from the physical evidence going to Quantico. So they came out here, they took a lot of evidence, they put it in trucks or planes or whatever, and flew that stuff back to Quantico. And then you have within a day, you've got the bullet holes that are in the ground over here. That was one of the first things me and Laura did when we walked the grounds. I was the first person to walk the grounds when they pulled the tape. What did I do? I called Laura right away. That's the first person I called. I get on the phone, I call Laura, and she comes out, and we're both walking the grounds. First people to walk the grounds. And, they had already patched up a lot of the areas where the bullets would have struck from different angles or could prove second shooters. And then I found that that one mark that I thought may have been a ballistic mark, and aimed the laser up, and next thing I know, it's pointing at the second tower over here at the venue. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty trippy, but pretty amazing time. But they covered up the evidence. They're blacktop. They're putting tar over the top of the evidence.
Right.
Yeah. And not only that, but the victims had to file a restraining order against MGM to get them from not destroying the evidence, because they were going to destroy the evidence in the room. Remember that? So
yeah,
let's not forget. Let's not forget.
Yeah, go ahead. And the other thing about the room is, I get a phone call. Someone tells me, this is the week after when the lawyers went and they walked the venue. They had one day they came in before the vendors could take all their equipment out from the the vendors that sold the cotton candy, the vendors sold drinks and beer or whatever. They came in to get their equipment out. But before they could do that, the lawyers asked to walk the venue. But the next week, they were supposed to be able to go into the room. So I get a phone call telling me something was going on with the room. I said, what's going on? They said they took the carpet out. Okay, did they, the carpet, assuming the carpet where Stephen Paddock bled out. So instead of just taking that strip around there, they took it all out. They took everything out. And then in doing so, that means they moved everything in the room, which basically destroyed any reason to go into that room. So I'm, giving that information to the individuals that need the information, and they never were able to go into the room. It was mute anyway, because they basically destroyed a crime scene. Absolutely nuts, unbelievable. And that was a judge ordered that room be sealed, and that none of the evidence be touched or anything like that. After the FBI went through it, dusted whatever they had to do, and next thing you know,
they're so concerned about making money instead of actually providing answers that they decided to renumber the floors in Mandalay Bay. So the floors from, correct me if I'm wrong, the floor numbers exactly that they renumbered were floors 32 to, what were the floor numbers?
It was 30. I think they actually went one or two floors down, because me and Sleep.
32. It was floor 32 to.
32 is 57 now.
Yeah.
Floor 31 is now 56. The ones below that kept their same numbers, but those numbers went up to, started at 56, then 57. So floor 32, add 15 floors to that, they went to 57, or 25 floors.
Yeah. So they renumbered it so that basically that floor doesn't exist anymore. The 32nd floor doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Yeah, they would like to do everything in their power they can to just try to erase it from memory.
Yeah.
Right?
So when Laura and I went in there, you can see Laura when she gets off I'm videoing her, and she points to the elevator, shows floor 32, and then we come back, boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, Fox 5 is airing the story, and they say that now they have security by there, and that Mandalay Bay issued a statement, which is one of the only statements they have ever issued, that they're reviewing the video and that they're going to put possibly security measures into place to handle it. So 2 weeks later, I come back, I bring another friend. I've taken like 5 or 6 people up there. And so 2 weeks later, I come back and I take a friend of mine, Jeff, and we get on the elevator, and there was no security. The security protocol they put in place was 3 little panels on the wall. All I had to do was wait until the valet person goes by, he walks into the door, and I just walked in behind him. Didn't have to press a button, manipulate a lock, do anything.
And it doesn't help that they hire a bunch of illegals and have a bunch of people who don't speak English. I mean, if your employees don't speak English and they're more concerned about making a paycheck instead of whether they're here legally in this country, well, of course your security isn't going to be good, right? And this goes back to questions about Jesus Campos and his status as well, and why they're so quiet about him, right? Is he legal? Is he here legally? Why is it that his registration as a security guard came up as being, not exactly valid, right? He had a very suspicious. Yeah, he didn't even exist in their system of official security employees. And so this is another issue. And I've been told by many people who work at MGM who have told me privately and in confidence that a lot of their coworkers don't speak English, and that MGM has a common practice of employing people with questionable residency issues. So that's another thing. They don't speak English, and some that might offend some people, but you can't expect hotels to be very secure places when you have a bunch of people who are just incompetent and not capable of speaking English. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah. Hey guys, we've got about 4 minutes left. Laura, on that same topic, I did want to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit about your interaction with Steve Sisolak here just recently. We're kind of low on time here, but I did want to give you the opportunity. I was there. I saw it firsthand. So maybe if you want to share that story, if you're willing, and maybe we'll just kind of end it off on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if we're like 5 minutes over, that's okay. But you can play the video for people if they want to see it. But yeah, I was actually in Starbucks having coffee, and unexpectedly, Steve Sisolak, who of course is the Clark County Commissioner, very good friends with Sheriff Lombardo, endorsed Sheriff Lombardo for his reelection campaign, is running for the Democrat position of governor in Nevada. And I confronted him about the Vegas shooting and other things when he walked in. So you can play it.
Yeah, I'm playing it here. We won't be able to hear the audio just because of the limitations here of what I've got set up. But yeah, some of the things I heard you confront him with, and I understand the full video is going to be released tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, the full video will be released tomorrow. Of course, Twitter has a limit on videos for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. But Eddie was also there, and Eddie was also filming, and the thing is we asked him a lot of questions about his gun policy, the Vegas shooting, ISIS terrorists coming in, committing the Vegas attack, and then also where's the money for the GoFundMe victims. So the full video will be available tomorrow. So if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter at Laura Loomer, and that full interaction will be up soon. But he's a coward, you know, and he couldn't handle the questions. And when you watch the video, notice how he was sitting down the entire time until I mentioned the fact that there was evidence that shows ISIS came in through the border and committed the Vegas shooting. And he was so uncomfortable, he got up and walked away. You have to ask yourself, right? Especially if you study body language like I have. Why would you walk up? Why would you get away or walk up and move away when talking about ISIS? What is it about me mentioning ISIS in Vegas triggered him so much?
Yeah, interesting that kind of correlated with him deciding that, instead of just sitting here and kind of burying it, he was just gonna he is standing up in the video.
That's the moment.
And kind of tried to to walk away.
Right, exactly.
Great. Okay, yeah. So everybody that's watching, go ahead and check that out. I'll put a link in the description to it on Twitter here after this video. After this live stream is completed. So you can go ahead and check it out there, and then just keep an eye on Laura Loomer's YouTube channel and her Twitter accounts to be able to see the full video once it comes out.
Great.
I think let me see here. I'm just going through my notes, seeing if there's anything else. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to share or plug here as we kind of wrap up?
We plug each other. I plug Laura Loomer.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks.
No problem.
It was a good talk, very informative, but we can't allow for the Vegas shooting to go unreported, and we need to hold these people accountable. And if you live in Nevada, regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat, I know it's mixed, and I know a lot of you don't agree with my personal politics, but you cannot vote for Steve Sisolak. All right, he has participated in this cover-up of the Vegas shooting, and if you don't want to vote for Adam Laxalt, then just don't vote at all for governor if that's the case. If you don't want to vote, if you're a Democrat and you don't want to vote for the Republican, but you cannot vote for Steve Sisolak if you were a survivor of the Las Vegas shooting, because he has worked to block the release of the evidence. He is a horrible person. So, you know, I would just encourage everybody to not vote for Steve Sisolak.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think, you know, you kind of brought up one thing here as we go over a little bit here, but I did want to touch on one topic here really quickly, which is, well, it's actually kind of a two-part thing, but how can we as a community, because really, you know, my channel is dedicated to the investigation of the Vegas shooting, and most people that subscribe here and that are probably watching right now are also, you know, mainly focused on Vegas, but how can we stay focused here as we kind of approach possibly the end of the evidence releases and then the forthcoming FBI release, and then, you know, Sisolak either, you know, being elected or not? How can we help each other to stay, you know, kind of keep this in the spotlight? And this is kind of an open question to both of you.
Well,
there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. That's the primary thing, is that the victims and survivors and everybody involved that I've met out here, they have questions and they're not getting the answers. And we're a year into this and there's still questions that are not answered. And all they did with the evidence was basically like a big FU. They took all this evidence and barreled it up and blasted it out there. No explanation, no nothing. They just, you like today, you go get the disc or your chip and it's filled with stuff. There's nothing on there that explains anything that you've received or any of that. So we're still receiving evidence, receiving stuff, great, fine, and we have to interpret it all. So naturally, you're going to take it, and different people are going to interpret it different ways, and we have to sift through it and hear everyone's being victimized all over again. It's for us to decide what we're listening to. It's for us to decide everything, for explanations, even simple things, and we get nothing, absolutely nothing. And Sheriff Lombardo said he wasn't going to do any more press conferences on this subject. So
yeah, we are kind of on our own, right? Laura,
Right.
Absolutely.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to keep asking questions and to, pay attention and be alert and never stop asking questions. Don't let it fade away, because that's what they're trying to do by releasing the evidence slowly over these batches every single Wednesday afternoon. They're hoping that people forget about it, but people don't understand that these court-ordered releases are still taking place. And you need to ask questions. If you see these people in public, you need to confront them. You need to hold Sheriff Lombardo accountable and Steve Sisolak and remind them, what the hell happened to the $12 million that was supposed to go to the Vegas shooting victims? Did you pocket that money? Is that money sitting in Steve Sisolak and Sheriff Lombardo's personal bank account? Because I wouldn't even be surprised if it was.
Yeah. So what I heard from both of you is like, let's, stay the course, continue to look at all the evidence, continue to raise the issues, the questions that we all still have and still are unanswered, especially after that FBI report comes out. We're going to still have questions. I'm guessing, I'm speculating, but we're still going to have a lot of questions after that.
We need to demand accountability. Accountability.
You need to demand it.
And I think that's kind of continued conversation we need to keep having is how do we best do that? Maybe we don't have the answers, but once we reach the end of this evidence release in the FBI report, I think that we need to start to consider how we can do that, how we can, demand the answers, more publicly, or maybe it's going to take another protest like you and I both were at, Laura, when we met the first time. So let's just kind of continue to brainstorm how are we going to approach that in the coming months, and hopefully not years. Hopefully we get some answers, but at least in the coming months.
Well, thanks for having us on. And like I said, make sure you follow my YouTube and my Twitter tomorrow so you can see the full Sisolak release and see how uncomfortable he was when questioned about Vegas. And don't vote for Sisolak. Election day is November 6th. I'm telling you guys, if you want answers about the Vegas shooting, do not vote for Steve Sisolak.
Great. Thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody that joined the live stream. I know you guys were active in the live stream chat. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to really go back and see any questions that were asked, but we were here a little bit limited on time. But Laura, I'd love to have you back on, and maybe we can talk about some of those other topics another time.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
And Mike, of course, as well. All right.
You got it, buddy. I'll be here for a few more days. If anyone's in the Vegas area and you want to come by and see me and talk to me directly, I'll be here at the M Expo, which is right here at Mandalay Bay Convention Center. Oddly enough, I'm still allowed in the facility. However I'm doing that, I don't know. So that I'll be here. Just come by, visit us, visit me. I'll be at the American Lafon booth, which is 1403. If you need to contact me, I'll get you a pass to get you in. You don't have to pay anything. Just come by and say hey and ask whatever you want. I'll answer as best I can. We'll get some answers for you.
Yeah, and that's just one last thing. You both, Mike and Laura, have been just great helps to the community in helping to bring light to some of these things. And I just wanted to really say thank you for that, and encourage other members of the community. If we have stuff that needs to have the flag raised, it needs to be published out in a louder format. These two can definitely be helpers to that. So thank you both.
Absolutely.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Yep. Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye, Laura.
Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.